Right.
So I think it's the same thing, like being really mindful of what you post. Now, do you accept your boss's friend request? I say why not, as long as you have nothing to hide. If you're
For me.
yeah, so cool. Well, we wanted to talk a little bit about a common topic that people it happens to us all. The kind of the question of the day is what happens when your boss friend requests you. Specifically I think on Facebook, because I know Instagram, I don't know, maybe that's also a place where you have things that you're posting you
Hmm.
don't want them to see. But like, what would you do? So Lisa, what would you do you know in this case where you have a lot of your personal life online? Like, what do you do when your boss wants to kind of pry into that?
It's such a fine line because, like, as an employee, you obviously want your Facebook to like look normal. You don't want to have like those horrible, awful things that you hear the horror stories about, and that people get fired and all that stuff for what's on their social media. So I think it falls in a little bit on both hands. Like the employee side have to be professional, even in a really non-professional setting. If you want to be anything really in life, like they pull up dirt from 20 years ago on everybody. So just watch what you're doing. But from the boss side of it, having a boss in there, it's I it depends who it is, in my opinion. I don't see any time where like you wouldn't be able to accept a boss, because then it would just be weird. Like if you saw him the next day at work or whatever,
It's
you'd have
so
to like be
weird.
like, oh,
I didn't see that.
right. But yeah, I mean, with the right relationship and everything, I think, people are friendly with their bosses, people do stuff. It's also another side of it too, is that it gives you something to talk about with your boss. Like if you see they went to like a cool restaurant or something, like it helps push along small talk, helps you get to know someone a little bit better and build relationships internally with your team.
Yeah. So I agree with that. I think if you are, and maybe this just depends on your age. So 10 years ago, I mean, when social media didn't exist when I was a teenager. I mean, it didn't even really, I was already in my 20s when people were on like MySpace and stuff like that. So, um, which probably makes Lisa feel very
I know,
young, makes me feel really old.
I feel
Um,
good.
but like, I see what people, obviously the types of things they post on like Instagram and stuff. And I think it would be really awkward to have your boss stare at you when you're in your bikini photos and like you're partying with your friends. And
Right.
I think it would be a little bit weird. The funniest thing happened with you and I. God, Lisa and I have known each other for 3.5 years. And
Sure.
I remember one time and I was like, oh, you're on Instagram? I'm going to find you. And she goes, you're never going to find me. And I didn't know I couldn't find her because of her name. Her name on her Instagram, which after I did finally like become your friend on there, I was like, that is like very clever.
That
So
makes sense.
what's interesting is like, I guess if you're smart enough, you would create something that nobody's going to guess, right? It's not just your first name and last name or whatever it is, your handle. And then on the Facebook side, I actually have more people professionally that are friends with me on Facebook than I do personally,
Yeah.
which it's just changed over the years. At one point in time, it was everybody I knew from high school and college and my family, and they were all personal contacts. I almost never I would never be friends with coworkers even, because other people tag you in things. And
Right.
that's where I always found my nerves. It wasn't that I was going to post something, because my rule of thumb is like, if my grandma can't see it, I shouldn't be posting it on the internet. Like
Right.
anyone's
Exactly.
going to see that stuff.
Right.
But I actually would get really nervous if someone tagged me in like a dirty joke or something that was a little bit, a little bit risky.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the worst part. You
That
can't.
makes you can't get.
Yeah.
So I think Facebook got better with their settings over the years. Like you have to approve things you're tagged in or whatever it is. I think there's like ways around that now, but that was more of a nerve-wracking thing for me outside of just like the
What you can control, like you can't control someone tagging you something stupid, and my friends will do that. Like
and
they're
like they're
yeah.
yeah, and they say a lot of things that you're like, "Oh my god,
Right. Right.
why am I associated with you?" I have that too. It's funny. Like I think the way that we use social media is changing constantly. So even the younger generations are being more political. It changes What's interesting through that last election is how many people I think changed their opinions of other people.
Mhm.
Though you saw the posts of like, you can still be my friend even if you're a Republican or a Democrat, or like there were those posts where like you would see
Right.
people post, but I don't know. Like there were a lot of people that I saw that I know in like the industry that we're in who went on these massive political rants. And I remember thinking in my head, oh my gosh, like it it talks a lot about someone's character, I think. It's not, do we or do we not make that judgment based on what they're posting on social media? Do we
Right.
kind of say, okay, well, that's like their personal life, personal beliefs, it's separate from work, or do we carry that over and form an opinion about them and
I think
decide
it's
whether or not
impossible not to form an opinion. Like, even if we don't want to, like, we don't have to say we do, but deep down, I think we all do. And
I
I
think
think that that obviously needs to be taken into consideration on the employee side of it. Like, even if you're not, you might not know you're doing something weird, like you think whatever you're saying is normal or whatever, but someone's gonna see that and they're gonna think of you differently, whether you want them to or not. But that's just
it's like the bikini photos. Like
right,
they're going to look at you differently. You can
right,
never unsee those things.
right,
So I think it's the same thing, like being really mindful of what you post. Now, do you accept your boss's friend request? I say, why not? As long as you have nothing to hide. If you're a good
right.
person and you're, whatever it is, if someone tags you in something, you can always untag yourself, or if you don't want someone to see it. And be mindful of what you post. Like, don't go on rants about your company or
Right.
about your boss or things like that. I think um,
And I think
people,
age plays a big part in it too. I coach at a high school and they don't have Facebooks. They think Facebook is like for old
old
people that
people,
are old. Like I'm not pushing 30, but I don't know. They use it differently. They all have like fake profiles and all those kinds of things. Like it seems like they're obviously way ahead of the curve. Like so they are already planning on not having to deal with this. Like no one's gonna
yeah,
find me. This is fake. I'm gonna do whatever I want. So and then you have people like my age, I feel like I grew up pretty much like I think MySpace came out when I was in like 8th grade or something like that. So I've had it pretty much most of my life. But yeah, it just depends on age. And I think as you mature more, you hope, which maybe this past year has shown us differently, but you would hope that people are more mature on what they share and what they talk about
yeah.
on social media.
I,
But
I think what kills me is, and you're right, like just to not go too far off that topic yet. My daughter, who's turning 14 in a month, I said, Bella, did you see this thing on Instagram? Because she has an Instagram, and she's like, Mom, I don't even check Instagram. Like that to the next generation
cool.
outside of high school, down to she's in middle school, they don't use Instagram, and like they're on TikTok and all these other like little platforms. So it'll change. It's ever changing, and eventually your bosses are going to be too old to find out where you are, because I, I have a TikTok to monitor my daughter, and that's I wouldn't even know if someone was on it. Um, yeah. So yeah, I think you make a great point there. I I don't know. I just feel like we should all be careful about what we share on the internet anyway. It's not like it was where people just couldn't find us. I come from that weird generation where like technology was not where it is now.
Mhm.
I've never dated online. Like I don't even know what that world is like. So
Right.
it's just such an interesting transition into the workplace now, where I can find out a lot about someone on their socials. Now, leveraging socials to find out more about people, that's also interesting. Like when we get someone who applies, I check out their LinkedIn, or I might Google to see where their Facebook is. And for me, it's humanizing the person on the other side. And maybe that's why your boss requested as well. Like you just said, it's a good conversation starter where you can be like, hey, like I saw you ate there, like comment on their posts.
Mhm.
We're both friends. We're friends with our boss on his personal page. I see his kids, and likewise, if we post anything, obviously he can see our lives. And I think it does humanize someone outside of the workplace, which is a good thing.
Yeah. The
But
other side of that though is that like you always think about this and you think of like the employee doing something weird or posting something weird, but the other side of it too, in doing some research for this topic, I saw some pretty horrible horror stories
tell
about
me, tell me.
like bosses being weird. Like
What?
just like not stalking obviously, but like in the way that we would say stalking like on social
Yeah.
media. We're not like I'm gonna call the cops stalking, but like coming in and like talking about people that like knowing names that they shouldn't know, like about who, like just weird stuff. Like
Oh,
bosses can be nosy, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like a nosy boss
that's true.
is,
They want to ask what you're,
yeah, it's different than just like being their friend. you know, like I don't go and like search your profile and like look, you know, like it's just there's
A little much. Kind of
yeah,
crosses that weird line.
right. And then to like actually bring that into real life is even weirder. But I did also find a good stat from good old Robert Half, and 57% of employees are uncomfortable with being friends with their boss on social media. 37% are okay with it.
Interesting.
I thought it would be like it's pretty close to 50-50, but I thought it would be a little more close to 50-50.
I know. I guess it just depends on what you do in your personal life. Like,
Yeah, right.
if you're not, well, and especially like this is probably a common thing where you call in sick, but someone tags you that you're clearly out, or like
Yeah.
you can't work the weekend, or you know, whatever it is, agency life. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing something, and they find out you're like in Vegas partying. You know, those types of things where
Yeah.
that might also be a reason why you probably wouldn't want your boss. Now, I think it holds you to an honest standard when you are friends with your
Right. And
boss.
that's the like so are you're lying, so who's wrong? Like
That's on you. You should. One time, actually, it's so funny. I had my little sister. She's a nurse down in Los Angeles, and she's so sweet. Honestly, one of the most honest people I've ever met in my life. Like, she is just a good person. But I was coming into town, and I very rarely get to go see my family in California. And she took the time off of work, but she couldn't get time off, like planned vacation time off. So she had to call in sick. And I remember her coming to me and just being like, please don't tag me in any posts while you're here. Because I'm not supposed to be, I'm supposed to be sick. And I'm like, okay, no problem. But that was the thought, right? She was
Right.
friends with her coworkers or someone who's going to be like, she was with her sister and they were out at Disneyland and like, you know,
Right.
types of things. And yeah, so I personally think there's not a problem in having a friendship with your boss in that personal space, but it's up to you on what you're gonna show to them, right? And if you don't care, then you don't care. And I think that's fine. I think coming from a boss's standpoint, it's a way to connect for us. Like when I said that to you early on, and you're like, good luck finding me. It was a way to- right? Like it's a way to connect. It's a way to humanize. It's a way to be like, oh, cool. Like I care about you. I care about your family, or I care about how, you know, your personal life in a sense that like it'd be great to get to know you better. And social media is a great place to do that, where we can get to know each other better, even if we're just looking at where you ate tacos last Friday.
Right, exactly.
It's cool to just be like, oh, those tacos look so good. Um,
Especially when you work remote. Like we've
yeah,
known each other for so long. We've seen like we don't see each other every day. Like it's
we've
cool to see like
I know we haven't been in person maybe but a handful of times, but I
you're
feel like we know each other, right? Like
yeah,
I can text you and it's not weird.
right,
Like when
exactly.
I
You
bleached
don't
my
need
hair.
yeah.
Don't freak out. But yeah, I think it is cool to form friendships and ones that are meaningful and like, and that's how you do it, I think. Typically if you stay too siloed in the workspace, people don't really get to know you as well, because I think your work persona is often different than your home life persona. You're clearly more casual and like laid back with your friends and those types of things. I just recommend, as a boss, is this someone who you're close enough with at work to is it appropriate for you to friend request them? If you're detached from your employees, like you don't work with them all the time, I think it's actually fairly inappropriate. Like I wouldn't do that.
Right. That's a good point too. That's a really good point.
Yeah, like if I don't actually work with you every day, I don't I don't have a reason to know your personal life.
Right.
I actually am only friends with people or coworkers or people who I've worked with who were close enough to me where I would talk about my weekend anyway with you. I would talk about my
Right.
kids with you. Those are the types of people that I will either friend request or are friends with me on social media because I'm close enough to them. But if your boss is like out of the blue just friend requesting you, I also think bosses are going to try and use that as a way to check on people or see,
Mhm.
it's not always in the most genuine, I want to get to know you
Right,
way.
exactly.
That's just, we all need to be honest about that.
Right.
And that's not how it should be used. People are free to live their lives how they want to live their lives, and their work life is different and separate, and that shouldn't be judged. Like what we were saying with the election, like how many people I know in this industry that I interact with, and I'm like, I know how you think now, and now I
Yeah.
feel weird.
Being human, like you don't want to judge, but to some degree, like you have the thought in your head.
I think
They planted the seed.
it's funny when I was saying up those posts that like people were like, we'll still be friends, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I feel like you're trying to just prove a point when you post those things. Yes. Would it be great if you don't judge someone on those opinions? Absolutely. But we're human. It's what we're conditioned to do. If you can be open and accepting to everyone's point of view, then you've hit a level of maturity that I hope everybody gets to, right? Everybody should strive to do that. But in the back of your head, you're still going to remember that awful thing they posted on social media. And that's what will carry you through the year.
Right.
That guy, and oh my God, do you remember what he posted?
Right.
You know, and that's just the way our brains work. So anyway, so we wanted to talk a little bit about this topic of like, what do you do in this case? From a boss's perspective, how we do it or why we do it to begin with. And, you know, hopefully it helps build connections for those of you who are close enough to your coworkers or bosses where, yeah, I already talked about my life with you. It's cool if we're friends on social media. For those of you who have no idea what your boss's life looks like, and they don't, you know, you don't want them to know yours, then don't accept it. It's your choice. Like,
Yeah,
at the
have
end
a
of the day, it's
awkward
totally
Monday
your
morning when you walk in.
free will.
Yeah.
When they can look at you and go, I know you have a hangover right now. Because
Yeah.
that's what you're doing this weekend.
At 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this short of ours, and hopefully we have a new episode out soon. Lisa and I are in the depths of agency life, just knocking out the new year. So we're hoping to sit down and finally record a new episode, which likely will be around, I think, a similar topic, maybe around social media or something that is more generational for us and our bosses, obviously. So we'll kind of talk about those things then. Until next time, see ya.
Later.